Before the release of Streets of Rage, Capcom's Final Fight was the dominating beat-em-up on the market for the arcades. However, with the inferior home port on the SNES unable to support co-op play, SEGA was looking for an opportunity to capitalize on the shortcoming with the birth of Streets of Rage. With Streets of Rage 2 being one of my favourite games of all time, and the much anticipated Streets of Rage 4 on the horizon, let's take a look at where it all began and see if it still holds up today with 1991's Streets of Rage for the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive. So as expected, the story is a very simple one. Ex-cops Adam Hunter, Axel Stone, and Blaze Fielding head out to take down a crime syndicate led by a man known as Mr. X, who has purged a once peaceful city. The game offers the ability to play both solo and in local co-op, the latter affecting the overall difficulty of the game by increasing the amount of enemies that need to be defeated and asking you to defeat 2 bosses instead of 1. With a choice of 3 playable characters, namely Adam, Axel or Blaze, you take to the streets beating up various enemies with your bare knuckles. Each of the playable characters offer a slight difference in play style in terms of speed, jump and strength, which while sounding subtle, does feel pretty different when in play. While playing as Blaze, I could be wrong, but it felt like she had slightly more attack range and gave her back attacks a much needed anti-air which came in handy against her clones. The game also offers a variety of different weapon types to help mix up the style of play, from knives to baseball bats and even a pepper shaker. These are found in stages through breakable objects and can help with increased damage as well as offering extended range to the player, which when utilised well can make things a whole lot easier. You have the ability once per life, unless you find an extra one in the level somewhere, to summon the police to help you out in a tight spot, with them firing a giant missile type attack that covers the stage in flames, dealing massive damage to all the enemies on screen. Just look at the way it's done in Stage 7. Not sure how they managed to pull that one off. Sadly, this ability can't be utilised in the game's final level. These are great to use when surrounded by a large group of enemies in the later stages, but I found them most useful on the bosses. Speaking of the bosses, you'll find one at the end of every stage aside from Stage 7. Their hits will always deal massive damage, so you need to be careful how you approach them. They all seem to have their own patterns and strategies, which when mastered could see you wiping them out without taking a single hit. In my opinion, the Blaze clones are by far the most difficult to deal with, but as I mentioned earlier, Blaze's back attack will work wonders. When you finally make it to Mr. X, he will offer you the option to become his right-hand man, which if accepted when playing alone, will drop you through a trapdoor all the way back to Stage 6. So much for becoming partners in crime. But to be fair, you did just wipe out a considerable amount of his gang on the way. Interestingly enough, if you happen to be playing the game in co-op, you'll have potential access to a bad ending. If one player answers yes and the other no, a brawl begins between the 2 player characters. Once this battle ends, Mr. X will then proceed to ask you yet another question in order to join him, and if you answer no to that, after taking him down as the final boss, you are then treated to the game's bad ending, which sees you become the boss of the crime organisation. I really appreciate how your prior response and taking out the person who has potentially been by your side the entire playthrough holds its effect in the end credits. The gameplay feels fluid and simple enough for anyone to pick up and play, albeit with a small amount of fighting options, which luckily the later games fixed. That doesn't mean you can't still find variety in your attacks there. You have the standard jab attack, which can be comboed, adding in some entertaining flair, which will knock the enemy down. You can also jump kick to give yourself space in a fight, and you can also throw enemies to the floor or onto each other, which always feels satisfying to pull off, especially in Stage 7 where you can throw them to the ground below. The game has a very generous amount of hits done, which on single enemies can be great for dispatching them with ease, including some bosses. You can even save yourself from taking damage from a throw, giving the game a bit more complexity, which is always welcome. It It's astounding just how fun the game is to play even by today's standards. I still enjoy my time with it whenever I come back to it. One thing in particular that aids the enjoyment of the game is the legendary soundtrack composed by none other than Yuzo Koshiro. The Streets of Rage franchise has always been well known for its amazing soundtrack, and the first kicks it off well. Many of the tracks were inspired by techno, house and club music, which you can really feel as you play through the game, heightening your overall experience. I find myself revisiting the music even outside of the game. It is just that good. It's definitely one of my favourite video game soundtracks, along with the sequel, which builds upon the foundation set by this game and manages to go one better in my opinion. While it may not look as high caliber in terms of graphical quality in contrast to other Genesis Mega Drive games, it still looks appealing, and it's clear what you're looking at when you're playing. Characters pop well against the beautiful backgrounds, and each level has its own distinct feel, giving you a rush as you fight from the bright neon lit streets, to beachfronts and cruise ships, all the way up to the Syndicate headquarters. Each level feels memorable in both a visual and auditory sense, and they merge together seamlessly, leaving a lasting impression on the player. Streets of Rage as a whole is a game I would definitely recommend trying out for anyone that hasn't done so already, and especially fans of the beat-em-up genre. This is a title not to be missed, if not for the fun arcade-style gameplay, then for the legendary soundtrack. Thank you so much for watching, and perhaps I'll see you in a future video.